Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Ironside and our Take30 series. My name is John Fellner. Got Michael Vollmer here, my colleague, and we are going to talk you guys through some updates that we learned from the Microsoft Business Applications Summit, which was about a month ago. So here's our agenda for the day, and I want to remind everyone to please put your questions into the chat if you have any questions, and we will attempt to answer those either in the middle of the session or at the end when we have a Q&A. But if you think of something, please don't wait, put it in that chat. So we're going to talk through some of the Power BI licensing model, a few highlights from the conference. We're going to talk through what the whole Power Platform is, which is part of the Power BI. Power BI is part of that ecosystem. And then we're going to mostly focus on a lot of the Power BI roadmap items. Some of them have already been made generally available as of the conference, which was a month ago. And some of them are up and coming, but to be released this year. And then last, I'm going to go over what's called the goals feature, which is also a new feature that's coming out kind of on the roadmap as well, but it's not really a Power BI feature. It's a feature that's an integration with Teams. And then we'll have some Q&A. Okay, so a reminder here that every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, we do have Take30 Sessions, and you can see what some of the topics are there. There's a link there if you want to screenshot that to see what the upcoming series are. We probably are going to host these after June, but this is what we have on the docket for the next several weeks. Okay, as I mentioned, Michael and I are the two panelists. I'll introduce myself and I'll let Michael do the same. My name is John Fellner. I'm an engagement manager with Ironside. Been here almost 10 years. Most recently, we've become a Microsoft Gold partner. So over the last couple of years, we've gotten really into the sort of Power BI realm and started to do a lot of projects with that. And Michael and I are both in charge of kind of any Microsoft project that comes through our consulting services department. Michael?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
Yep, great. So Michael Vollmer from Ironside again, senior consultant. Been working with BI tools for 25 years or so. Really have gotten heavy into the Microsoft Azure platform the last couple of years. We're starting to see a lot of growth in that area. Obviously, everybody on this call understands why. So my focus lately has been mostly just the Azure and Power BI specifically. So.
All right, thanks. Okay. So just some highlights from the conference. This was a conference that's been going on for maybe 4 or 5 years, and it used to move around the country. I went to the one in Seattle a few years ago, which was really, really good conference, probably mostly because I got to travel to Seattle and have some fun, but it was a really good, well put together conference by Microsoft, obviously close to their home base. It was supposed to move to Dallas, Fort Worth last year, but then the pandemic hit. And they scrambled to put together this really good online version of the conference, which improved even more this year. It was 100% online, so they were able to really nail that and make it more collaborative this year, where they'd have sessions with experts where you could participate on video or not, but you could participate and ask questions of the experts, in addition to their presentations that they give on the the features and roadmaps and whatnot. So it was focused on Dynamics and Power Platform. Our focus was more to learn about the Power Platform, including Power BI, of course, to find out what's going on there and what's up and coming. If you didn't already know it by now, Microsoft is a pretty big player in the analytics space. Over 260,000 organizations worldwide. And they mentioned 3 million instances of Power BI desktop being run across the world. 97% of the Fortune 500 uses it in some capacity. Obviously, not all of them use it to the same degree, but it's definitely gained some traction over the last few years, and it's still a pretty young tool. But I'm going to explain a little bit more about how it's more than just Power BI and this whole ecosystem of the Power Platform. One thing I really like about it is that the new features that are implemented are oftentimes taken from what's called the Power BI ideas community. So what you do is somebody can go in and write up, a most requested feature, and they will go in and people will vote on that feature. And over time, eventually those features get implemented after they get voted on. So it's really nice to have input as to the direction of the platform. And they mentioned on this, during the session, that on that day, May 4th, they actually released, I think, 3 of their top 4 most requested features. So it is kind of a community guided development plan. Gartner Quadrant, they're definitely in the upper left in the leaders, and also for Forrester. So they're being seen as kind of a major player here. And maybe they weren't more than 5 years ago when Power BI came out, but they definitely are recognized as a leader with the analysts. So one thing that's interesting about Power BI is they have a very simple license model, but I wanted to walk you through kind of a quick evolution of how that came about. So in 2015 was when the product actually became an actual product and was released to the public, which is only 6 years ago. So it's, as I mentioned, it's kind of a young product. The desktop version came out, which has always been free. It still is free to download and use. However, you run into limitations when you want to do things like share things and publish them to the web. So there was a Power BI Pro license that still remains $10 per user per month. And then in 2016, they started bundling it into Power BI Office E5 to give even more of a footprint for the tools. In 2017, enterprises started to use it more prominently and more across the board. So they came up with what's called a premium capacity, which has a lot more power than just the individual licenses. But the price point started at $5,000 a month. That's basically for like 1,000 users is what they recommend that for. So it's for larger organizations, but it gave them a lot of the features that you see on the right here. But what ended up happening was people loved the features, but they weren't able to use them if they were in a smaller or mid-sized company. So what they've just launched is in 2021 is something called a premium per user license, which you can individually license to people at $20 a user a month. And the only difference between that is that it's not undedicated capacity. You're sharing your capacity with others, but a lot of people liked the feature set that was in the premium. So what you can see on the right here is really the only differences are you've got 100 gigabytes of capacity versus 400 per model, and then some other things like with multi-geo support, Power BI reports on-prem. But that license is going to be a really popular option. And again, it was just released, I think, a month ago. Okay, so I mentioned that Power BI or the Power Platform is more than just Power BI. Power BI, or the Power Platform, is an integrated platform for business applications, workflow, analytics. I'm going to actually hand this over to Michael to explain a little bit more about what the components are and why it's important that we think of Power BI as more than just one tool. Michael?
Yeah, thanks, John. So as you start your experience with Power BI, you need to consider that it actually is just a small piece of a much bigger picture here. And as you have it here on the PowerPoint deck slide from John, you can see that Power BI is, again, part of what we call the Power Platform. Now, the Power Platform is actually a very, very powerful set of tools that are all well integrated, right? So if you're looking at this diagram again, you see the middle of it is this thing called a Dataverse. Now, Dataverse is not the greatest name, but it was called the Common Data Model, which is more inducive of what really it is. And what this is basically, again, it's a common data model that you can pump data into, and that's available to all the tool sets. So you're looking at the exact same metadata and the exact same actual data itself across from Power BI to Power Automate to Power Apps, right? So if you have, let's say, Dynamic 365 from an ERP standpoint, the data is automatically going to get pumped into your Dataverse, right? And so consuming that data, it makes it just much easier. But again, it's the center of the universe. It's the one thing that holds it all together. You don't have to use it, but it makes it extremely powerful. Now, if you come from a legacy tool set, from BI, if you will, let's say Cognos or the other ones that are out there, then, there's some functionality there that you may not find, let's say, from an automation standpoint in Power BI. And the reasons that is that it's not all part of Power BI. You need to, branch out and look at, for example, Power Automate. So Power Automate's a great tool for scheduling reports. You can have things run off of alerts. Let's say you want to kick off certain reports on a refresh when a database is finished loading. Again, you would do that with Power Automate. You can have Power Automate listen for certain events. Let's say an inventory level reaches a certain threshold. It can send out a bunch of emails and some Power BI reports that give you documentation around that, right? So if you're one of my favorites is a lot of people ask is how do you do a bursting type of scenario in Power BI? And if you're familiar with bursting, is you're looping through a set of data and you're reproducing the same report, but for different filters for different users. And the way you do that is you use Power Automate, which again is just an automation tool, but it's a drag and drop GUI that's web-based, no coding really required. And then the Power Apps is really actually, I think it's pretty powerful tool. And that's more of a data input. So if you need to go out and retrieve data for users, right, and you need an interface that doesn't require any coding, it's drag and drop, that's a part of the Microsoft universe, then Power Apps makes sense. So you pull the data in from the Power Apps, automate your reports, and then you report off of it using Power BI. All right, John, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I just want to mention one other thing that it's integrated with Teams and Excel and SharePoint. So from a collaboration standpoint, if your organization has those tools set up already, all of these tools are integrated. And from the user standpoint, they don't really need to worry about being a technical person, right? That they can collaborate and know that this whole platform is supported with all the other Microsoft tools.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the key from today, we take away is the integration across the Microsoft products, Power BI, that is on the forefront, right? So obviously Teams, you're right. I totally forgot to mention that, but it's natively integrated into Teams. I use that now. A lot of my customers, Excel, you're going to see a lot more integration. We're going to talk a little bit about that later on in the deck, but you're seeing Power BI just going to be out of the box here soon. Some features already are inside of Excel, right? So more and more, it's just going to be a natural solution for any Microsoft-based company.
Okay, so I'm going to walk through some of the features that they presented at the conference that are up and coming. Some of them may have already been released by now, a month later. And as you may know, Power BI likes to release what's called preview features, which is sort of like what they used to call beta in the old days, but it's public preview so that everyone can see it. And I've never seen them take a feature back, but what they'll do is they'll leave it out there for a few months, possibly, before they make it what's called generally available. So some of these features may or not be in the tool, but you can check a box that says, enable this preview feature if you want to kind of play around with that feature. So there was something called Quick Insights that went into the product a while ago, and that's basically an AI feature inside of Power BI that will take a look and figure out what kind of trends and do some deeper analysis of your data so that you don't have to do it. So, a lot of our life is being automated these days, as we know. You get in the car, Google tells you, hey, are you going to the gym? It's the same type of thing, but in this way, it's automated. So basically, it can look at any one of your dashboards or data sets and pick out anomalies or trends. And the anomalies, might not be readily apparent from what you're looking at on the front screen of a dashboard, but it's going to find them for you and suggest certain things. So if you look here, if you click on this and drill in, you might see that some of these data points are what they're calling anomalies because they're just too far away from the mean or the whatever it is, right? But then it will do more, and it'll try to dig in and say, well, maybe that anomaly is due to X, Y, Z. So the material type is battery here, and on these days, looks like we had a high defect rate, right? So the AI is working for you to help you try to detect things. The same thing with trends. If it realizes that, your, downtime is too high or something, it will try to analyze trends and identify like large increases or decreases in your data, and then allow you to look at multiple analyses to figure out which one's relevant, because some of them may not be relevant, right? The robots aren't always right. They're just looking for trends. And then the third one is called KPI analysis, where if you're comparing something to a goal, and the goal is something that looks like it's not going to be very attainable. Let's say you set a sales goal for the month, and then you get through 2/3 of the month and you've only hit 50% of your sales goal. It's going to probably identify it there and say, hey, you've got a lot of ground to make up in order to hit that goal. So this one's coming soon. I thought this was pretty neat. Next, we have Teams integration. Michael and I mentioned this a couple slides back, but if you think about your workflow, if you were running a report and you saw an interesting graph that you wanted to, collaborate on and ask people some information about the data, you can actually copy and paste. It's fully integrated into Teams. You can actually have the Power BI pane right inside of Teams, and click on an object in a report and then make it part of a chat, make it part of a conversation. And then as long as everyone has access to that, they'll be able to kind of interact with that data as well as have a conversation with you in a chat mode. So any data set could be integrated with Microsoft Teams. So just think of how powerful that is if you happen to use Teams in your organization and also Power BI. Next, we have Excel integration, which came about a while ago, but they've since kind of fine-tuned a few things. So if you have Excel 2016, you can leverage Power BI data sets inside of Excel natively. So I think you might need a certain level of licensing, probably Power BI Pro at least, maybe Premium, I can't remember, but you basically just say, when you get data, you can get it from external sources. The Power BI data sets are available to you there. And you can also do direct pivot table creation from a Power BI data set, and also publish it back to Excel online so that people can then view it in Excel, but they're actually looking at Power BI data behind the scenes. And next, there's one more really powerful feature that's coming that's kind of a game changer. I'm going to have Michael walk you through. It's called Power BI data types.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. So this integration with Excel, again, I think it's very, very important that you understand that Microsoft is really pushing this, right? So obviously the goal here is to allow you to have a centralized data set that is part of Power BI, but also you can use Excel, which obviously, let's face it, is probably the #1 BI tool, if you will, in reality, because everybody uses Excel, right? But instead of having that data offline, disconnected, you're actually connecting to live Power BI data, right? That is vetted and cleansed by your IT department or whoever it may be, right? So some of the features John talked about where you can get data from Power BI, some of that you can do now in Excel. It's actually, you have to go to Power BI and then do analyze in Excel, where it downloads a file, connects, and does all the stuff, and it's still live data. But now you can actually, it's going to be a smoother process. I don't know if it's out yet, available yet, but it's going to be, instead of you having to go through all those extra steps, it's going to be a part of Excel, right? One of the things that has been around for a little while now is this concept of data types in Excel. So data types was a sort of a new functionality that was added in Excel a couple years ago, maybe not that long, and it's actually quite neat. Basically, you have just data points. Let's say that one of the out-of-the-box options is, let's say, stock prices, right? So you can just simply in Excel type in a bunch of stock symbols, right? And then you actually can highlight those and then go to this data tab, data types option, and then it actually reads that information, looks up this information for these stocks, and fills in with real-time data into Excel. So, for example, the current price, the high, low for the week, things like that, right? So you now can actually take your Power BI data, right, and you can expose it as part of a data type. So somebody's building a report with a bunch of product let's say IDs, they can then highlight those IDs. And let's say they want some additional information. They don't know how to go obtain those product information. Let's say it could be description, it could be standard cost, it could be anything, right? Now they have a data type, they highlight it, click the button for your organization data, and it actually goes and looks up based on whatever you have highlighted in Excel, looks up those products, pulls that data back into Excel, and you get to pick and choose whatever columns you want to, data points you want to add. And again, it's live data, so it's connected at all times, so it can change and update. But again, the cool thing here is that it's connected back to Power BI data sets. So the reports you build in Power BI have the exact same data that you're building in Excel, right? So you don't have these offline, silos of reports out there in Excel anymore. Now it's just Excel is just another Power BI version, if you want to think of it, right? So, but this data types, I encourage everybody to look at this. I know that it works on the Office 365, online. The desktop version, I believe it depends on the license you have, but I believe anybody can consume the data. But what John was talking about, where you actually want to import data, the get data part, you do have to have a pro license to be able to at least consume data minimally and from Power BI. But this doesn't require, I believe, any licensing restrictions around that piece of it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, lastly, it does support full row level security. So, the key thing there, if you have security implemented, it's actually going to come over with that. So tight integration.
Yeah, they mentioned you could share those, and it would be the same. The person would be authenticating, right? And so if you shared a file with them, but they weren't able to see the data, it would restrict it, which is good.
Yeah, it's just an extension of Power BI, but native in Excel. And again, it's not offline; it's still attached to the data, so you can do all your fun Excel reports.
All right, paginated reports feature. I think you were going to cover this one too, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're using Power BI, you may or may not have heard of paginated reports. And I think that if you haven't seen it, you're missing out. It is actually a very good tool. What paginated reports is, just a little history, is it was, and I guess is now replacing reporting services, right? So reporting services is Microsoft's original attempt at BI solutions. Very powerful, much more powerful than most of the products you see out there, but it wasn't super user friendly. That's changed with paginated reports. Now you have the power of the reporting services, but you have the user friendly environment that you would with Power BI. The other thing too is you can use your data sets, all the data that you publish and whatnot from your Power BI into the paginated reports. Now, up until now, those two tools were not connected. So you had a paginated report, which is more for, like, let's say, print out invoices, pixel perfect offline, or not offline, but like maybe you want to print something out, but it's not a dashboard, right? You're consuming massive amounts of data. Maybe it's an export process, whatever, which doesn't lend itself to Power BI. So you build a paginated report, and then you had your dashboards, right, which was in Power BI. Now with this new paginated report visual that is in Power BI, it'll be a new visual that you can drag over, and you can actually reference data from the paginated report. So you can integrate both tools now in one environment. So as John is pointing out on the screen here, on the image here, the left side is a map. And as you click on the map, that is actually now filtering a paginated report data in, again, Power BI, and it's filtering that contextually, just like you would with any other visual in Power BI. But again, you've got that nice data grid, pixel perfect layout, whatever it may be, that you get from paginated reports. And paginated reports, again, can connect to data sets. It can connect to any data really that you have. So if you have an on-prem database and you want real-time data, paginated reports can do that too, right? So you can have a hybrid.
Cool. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a few more to go through here. Some of these will be quick. So streaming data flows are another thing that's kind of coming soon as part of Power BI Premium. If you think of the Internet of Things, IoT devices, right? Data in real time could be consumed by Power BI with this feature and merged in with, say, reference data that's, a lookup data that you have that's more stored in a traditional database. And this stuff is pretty much near, if not at real time, refreshed quickly. They use this thing called the Azure IoT Hub and the Azure Event Hub to kind of manage that real-time data. It's probably not structured, but when you tie it in with this, where you see kind of the demo here on the screen, you can kind of merge it in with existing data and have it kind of running in real time. So that looks like that's an up-and-coming feature later in the year. Next, we have what's called small multiples and the conditional formatting inside of charts. So some companies might call this a matrix chart, where you've got sort of a chart within a chart. So I've got multiple states here with sort of the same axes, but I zoomed out, or I zoomed in to just show you only 4 of them. You could have many more in a grid style, X number of rows and columns. And then on the right-hand side, we're demonstrating that you could do conditional highlighting of those bars. There are quite a few different options that you could configure there, but that's coming soon later in the year. Next is a simple but really nice feature if you had been working with Power BI in the past. In order to get to a drill through, you had to right-click and then surf through a few different menu options to get to this, but this is actually embedded in the tooltip, which is just a simple hover over the bar, and you're going to see a drill down or drill through option if you've configured it. I can't wait for that one, because that's going to save us a lot of time and confusion. Next, we have Sparklines, which are really something that seems kind of natural, but a lot of products, when you try to build Sparklines, it's not so easy to build them. But in this case, they're going to have one that's part of a table visual. So there's table visuals now, but now they're going to add this feature that allows you to put Sparkline columns in there and define the timeline that those represent and allow you to kind of highlight some things. So Sparklines, everybody loves them. Can't wait. Next, we have bookmark groups and page navigators. If you guys use bookmarks now, we know that it's kind of not so fun to put those together, and these are sort of a more packaged way of doing that. So on the left-hand side, a bookmark would be defined under each one of these, and I could change the visualization type on the fly and say here, it says a map, a table, a bar chart, whatever you want to put in here. But it's much more configured than the way that you have to do it now by setting up bookmarks. On the right-hand side, we're talking about page navigation. So if you have multiple pages in your dashboard, it will automatically recognize them and create, X number of buttons for you to click to those as well. You can tie this into security. So if you had a, sort of an executive level view on your dashboard, you could, only allow that audience to see that tab. But these are just kind of quick shortcuts on how to do things that were a little bit harder to author in the past. Another really interesting feature is this thing called automatic aggregations for really large data sets. What it's going to do is start collecting your query patterns, right? So when your users are hitting the data, are they hitting older data first? Are they only hitting certain tables? And this is an attempt to kind of optimize the performance, right, for a large data set. And over time, it'll learn what people are using, and then you can refresh. You can base your refresh policies on what actual data patterns are. It uses something called hybrid tables. Just really quick here. So if you know Power BI, there's an import mode and the direct query mode. In this case, the older stuff, it looks like it's being, set one time and forgotten, which is fine. But then there's an incremental refresh on the more recent stuff. And then the really recent stuff, it's direct query. It's just one example. Okay, real quick, because we're running out of time. This is my last feature to talk about, but there's something called Power BI Goals, which is a scorecarding application, but it's completely no code. You don't have to really do very much to configure it. If you got like a sales organization and you want to set targets for certain clients, how much sales they're going to hit by the end of the month, you can do that. You can bring people into this, so you can see they've got owners, right? So these are all people within your organization. You want to set goals for them. It's easy to collaborate. It's actually inside of Teams, but it's powered by Power BI, data sets, data flows, and data automate. It requires premium license or a per user premium license, as we mentioned before. But notice you can collaborate things in here. You can ask your sales rep why he's not hitting his target, for example. And then everyone has access to the same data, some trending, some due dates, some notes. It's really kind of a full-featured application, but it's powered by Power BI and integrated into Teams. A couple of future things that are in that roadmap, or so if you have like balanced scorecards with multiple metrics rolling up, you can keep track of them that way. You can cascade your goals. You can set up different rules. So it looks like it's going to be pretty sophisticated when this comes out. I thought that was a kind of a interesting new feature for certain organizations. So with that, we've kind of run to the end of our time here, but if there are any questions, please let us know in that chat. I don't know, Debbie, if you can see any of those, if there are any.
We don't have any questions, John, so I think we can.
Well, that's perfect. So we ate up all the time, and we want to thank you for your time, and this recording will be available on our website soon. Thanks, everyone.